Quigley Down Under, 1990. What was the historical event that inspired John Hill to write the script for Quigley Down Under? Who did the filmmakers originally have in mind to play the titular character in the 1980s? What did star Tom Selleck say was his scariest moment of filming? These and more questions will be answered on
Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
You know your weapons. It's a level action breech loader. Usual barrel length 30 inches. This one has an extra 4. It's converted to use a special 45 caliber 110 grain metal cartridge with a 540 grain paper patch bullet. It's fitted with double set triggers and a vernier sight, marked up to 1,200 yards. This one shoots a mite farther. Hello, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back. This is the 225th episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that tall, stoic rifleman and his crazy girlfriend about Back Look Cinema. I had forgotten much of what this movie was about. I only remember that it was about a man named Quigley and his cool gun in Australia. I'd have forgotten about his crazy girlfriend that was not his girlfriend. I forgot that Alan Rickman had played the bad guy. I totally forgot the reason for all the fighting and conflict was because Quigley was compelled to defend the lives of the Aboriginals that the villain that Rickman played, Elliot Marston's, wanted to murder. Basically, Mr. Marston wanted to kill any and all of the Aboriginal people that happened to be near his vast property. It was a property so large that it takes about 2.5 days on horseback to get from the edge of the property to the house where Marston lives. And he considers it his right by unofficial government decree to cut off any native person he found on his land. In the film, this was called pacification by force. But in more recent history, it is referred to as the frontier massacres of Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and non-Indigenous people across Australia. It was this history that inspired John Hill to write the script for Quigley Down Under. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the colonizers in Australia engaged in a series of massacres or relocation of the indigenous people, similar to what was happening to the Native Americans in North and South America. University of Newcastle historian Emeritus Professor Lyndall Ryan led a research project that estimated that more than 10,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders were killed in more than 400 massacres. This movie is deeper than I had initially expected it to be, and it allows me to appreciate it that much more. Let's find out more in the opening credits. Mathew Quigley traveled all the way from California to Australia looking for work. He is uniquely skilled as a rifleman and wants to put those skills to good use. As it turns out, nothing is as it seems. His employer hired him under false pretenses. A woman with mental illness, who everyone calls Crazy Cora, seems to have adopted him as her husband, and he soon finds himself the lone defender of the Aboriginal tribes of the surrounding area. He hadn't come down all the way to the land down under just to be stranded in an overly hot Australian outback. But Quigley is determined to survive. Released October 19th, 1990 by Pathé Entertainment, it grossed over $21 million in the US and Canada on a reported budget of $20 million. And as you know, this is not good at all. I was surprised to see this. It seems that this film had flopped, and it flopped hard. And I don't even remember if I saw this at home or if I went to the theater to watch it. All I remember is that I really enjoyed this movie. If you adjust it for inflation, had this movie been made today, the budget would have been $51 million and it would have grossed $53 million. Quigley Down Under stars Tom Selleck as Mathew Quigley. And I originally knew him as the main character on Magnum P.I. And he continued his adventure in television throughout the years and found a new home on the series Blue Bloods. But in the early 90s, he really had popped as a movie star. And he could have been seen in An Innocent Man, 3 Men and a Baby, Mr. Baseball, and a couple of other film projects. Laura San Giacomo played Crazy Cora. You might have seen her in Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Pretty Woman, or Suicide Kings. The legendary Alan Rickman played Elliot Marston, and he's been in Die Hard, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, or the Harry Potter series. Chris Haywood played Major Ashley Pitt. He can be seen in Muriel's Wedding or Kiss or Kill. Ron Hadrick played Grimmelman, and he's been in Shirley Thompson versus the Aliens, or you might have seen him in Codgers. This movie was directed by Simon Wincer, and the name was unfamiliar at first, but he's directed some of the movies that I really quite enjoyed, and those included The Phantom, Operation Dumble Drop. I hadn't seen the other two that I have on this list, and that includes Lightning Jack and Free Willy, a movie that's kind of an icon. Even I don't know about Free Willy that well. I haven't seen it, but I felt like that movie in particular had a cultural moment. As mentioned earlier, this was written by John Hill, and he did some writing and producing for L.A. Law and Quantum Leap, and that's where a lot of people know him from. He began writing this screenplay in 1978, and besides that, he doesn't have like a huge resume as it comes to film writing. There are some small films that he wrote, like Griffin and Phoenix and Little Nikita, and he has an uncredited additional writing credit for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The music was composed by Basso Polidorus, and this should have been familiar to me because he also wrote the music for RoboCop in 1987. And what I noticed about this film and many other films that I have where I've heard his music just feels iconic. Like the theme or the score for RoboCop feels iconic. The score for Starship Troopers feels iconic. And he also wrote music for Les Miserables, Breakdown, The Jungle Book for 1994, and again, Free Willy. And that's it for the opening credits. And as for announcements, I have one comment from a previous episode, The Last Starfighter, from Mark Crespo-M2C. And he wrote, "Awesome movie commentary episode, guys. Heart emoji." Thanks again to @Mark Crespo-M2C or -M2C. And that was a comment left on YouTube. I really appreciate that. If you want to leave a comment, you can leave a comment on YouTube, or you can go to the website and leave a message over there, or you can send an email to friends@backlookcinema.com. And now that we've talked about the opening credits, let's get into our favorite parts. So, the theme of this movie, I think, is quite simply everyone deserves compassion, dignity, and respect. And what it is that Mathew Quigley has compassion for the indigenous people. That includes the indigenous people of America and the indigenous people in Australia. When he's asked to, like, there's an ad in the newspaper in America that someone in Australia needs a sharpshooter, someone who could shoot long distances, and he answers that ad, but he's under the impression that he's being asked to shoot varmints like dingoes or critters or something like that, and he's all for it. So based on this information, he goes to Australia to take the job. And while he's there, he finds out that what the man really wants is for his men to kill off the Aboriginals that happen to be anywhere near his property. And as I said, Quigley had mentioned his compassion for the Native Americans. And so he is not fond of the notion of just going out and murdering people. In this case, the Aboriginals. And he violently opposes even being asked to do such a thing. And it's like he doesn't like articulate it in a profound way. He just simply has an innate empathy for these people, for any of the indigenous people. He has or maybe he just feels that it's just wrong to go out killing people just because they exist or something of that nature. But I think the core of all of this is that in his belief system, he believes that everyone deserves compassion and dignity and respect. And he extends that to the Aboriginal people, and he finds himself defending these people against Elliot Marston's and his men. Also, there are things that can be said about PTSD and mental health and basically learning to live with these conditions. So I guess that's layered onto the theme of this movie. I like the overall story that this movie presents. It's not so much as this is a wholly original story. There are lots of critics who are pointing out that it's not the most original story. But I don't think it has to be. I just think it has to be a story that's well presented. And I think that this is a movie that it really has a smart story. I really like the dialogue in it. One of the things that was said when describing Crazy Cora is that she was half bubble off plum. And I forgot who said that, but I just thought that was the most charming thing that somebody could say about someone with mental illness. And the reason it struck me is a half bubble off plum, what they're describing is a measuring tool called, what is it called? Well, we used to call it a leveler in construction. So it is a tool. It's basically a ruler, and it could be a short ruler or a longer ruler for larger objects. It has a straight edge, and within the ruler there is a vial with alcohol in it. It's usually colored green so that it's easy to see. And the alcohol has a little bubble in it, and it's got like these two vertical lines near the middle. And the object is to place this straight edge against an object that you want either perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal. And you may have used something like this when you were trying to hang like a photograph on your wall or hang your TV or anything that you wanted to be like level or straight vertical. And the object is to measure the object so that the bubble is perfectly in the middle of the two lines. And so something that is a half bubble off plumb is something that's not perfectly vertical. So I just thought it was just a neat thing to say. They have a lot of sweet lines like this in the movie. The movie starts off with basically a cacophony, just a lot of things going on at the same time, it seems. It's Mathew Quigley getting off of the boat, him being roughed up by Australians because he's a foreigner, and him sort of like defending himself, and then finding himself defending a woman who is fighting against him. And the men are basically almost kidnapping this woman to take back to their boss. And the woman is obviously being taken against her will. So Mathew Quigley is defending this woman. It's like he's just getting off the boat and he's already fighting with the locals, basically fighting for his sense of justice. I already mentioned about his empathetic tendencies and his belief in people deserve to respect. And like these men just taking women against their will for the sexual pleasures of their work group. It just didn't sit right with Mathew Quigley. So he's defending this woman who doesn't want to be taken by them. And in this commotion is where like after he's basically fought off these men is when he finds out that these are the same men that were supposed to take him to their boss. He had applied to do a job, and as it turns out, it was their boss that he was supposed to see. So it's a lot of commotion when this movie first starts off, and I thought it was a great way to start off the film. It's kind of like a fish out of water type of deal, but not as much as they did with something like Crocodile Dundee, where you had an Australian in America. And because this wasn't, in Crocodile Dundee, it wasn't just like a regular Australian dude that was in America. This was a dude that was like lived out in the wilderness, and he stayed out in the country and in the wilderness. And so it's more like it's a guy who wasn't used to like modern ways, because he's not, he doesn't really deal with civilization too much. In this case, in Quigley Down Under, even though it's a man there are some fish out of water elements, they're not played too much to comedic effect, and they're not stark differences. They're not stark cultural differences. It's basically an American dealing with the colonizers from England or wherever that they're colonizing from. I know that England was like the main country that was colonized in Australia, but I think there were some other countries involved too. In any case, the men that had gotten a scuffle with Quigley, when they realize who Quigley is, it's basically their job to take Quigley to their boss, to the boss's ranch. And because Quigley defended Crazy Cora decides to join Quigley. Like now she doesn't want to separate him. She keeps calling him Roy, which is another funny thing that happened in the movie. It's like he keeps telling her, my name's not Roy, my name is Mathew, but she insists that his name is Roy and that he is her husband. It's almost kind of like a case of mistaken identity, except it's not a mistaken identity. She just identifies him with Roy, and because she doesn't seem to be all there, she clings to Quigley. So she joins Quigley with the men to be taken to the ranch that she was actually resisting at first. When they get to the ranch, Quigley has to basically demonstrate his proficiency at using his rifle. And everybody's very impressed over this rifle. It is a very hefty looking weapon. And one of the best scenes in the movie is Quigley demonstrating his ability to shoot like distant objects. He's specifically hired to shoot distant objects. So he has to demonstrate this. And so the scene where he's showing off his weapon and demonstrating how far he can shoot, that was one of the best scenes in the movie. That was one of my favorite parts of the movie. And that particular scene can be found on YouTube. And in this rifle demonstration scene, you could see Crazy Cora has a weird way of waffling between identifying Quigley as Roy, her husband, and then not knowing him at all. So she waffles back and forth between those two things. So that's an interesting element about her character. And then later on, you learn why she's that way. The new boss, Elliot Marsters, is sufficiently impressed with Quigley's ability to shoot. So he hires them. He hires them to join the team. And then that night, Marsters basically explained the real reason that Quigley is being hired. So initially in the ad that Marsters had sent in the newspapers in America, in the ad it says that he wanted somebody to shoot dingoes. But when he's talking to Quigley face to face, he tells Quigley that he wants to shoot the Aboriginals that are near his property. And the problem that he has with the Aboriginals is that they have learned to keep their distance away from the rifles, or away from the guns in general. So they're keeping further and further away from his ranch. But I guess this isn't satisfactory for him. So he wants people who can shoot very long distances to basically shoot people off of what he considers his property. And this does not sit well with Quigley, and actually beats the man up and shoves him out of his own house. And that was a slight comedic moment. And this is because, like I said, Quigley has some affection for Native Americans, and that kind of affection extends towards the Aboriginals because of I guess he's seen the type of atrocities that have been committed against Native peoples, the first peoples. So because he's witnessed these atrocities, he doesn't want to take part in it. And I think he sees himself as stopping it if he could. So he takes offense to being asked to murder people that he has sympathy for. He kicks Marston out of his house, which is kind of a funny moment. And then he kind of prepares to defend himself against the entire group. But then in a stroke of, I guess you would call it irony, he's kind of knocked out by the Aboriginal manservant that was still in the house. So after he's knocked out, he and Cora are beaten up by the other ranch hands, and they're taken out to the Australian Outback. When Quigley and Cora are dropped off in the middle of the Outback to die, Cora is unconscious, and Quigley is barely conscious, but he has just enough consciousness to basically kill off the two guys that had meant to leave them out in the desert. So the first guy, he kind of tricked him to getting close enough so that he could be stabbed. And the second guy, he was able to get his gun and shoot the guy who was riding away from him on horseback. So at the very least, he has his rifle. And then he has to find a way for him and Cora to survive. And they wander in the outback until they basically pass out. And then they're rescued by an Aboriginal tribe. When Quigley and Cora are being nursed back to health by this Aboriginal group, there's kind of a cultural exchange. The group teaches them it basically teaches them their ways. It teaches them how to survive in the outback. They kind of become part of the group. They eat their food. They become familiar with them. And this is all done in a montage. And this is like one of the parts I totally forgot about when I rewatched this movie, because there's a whole community thing going on between Quigley, Cora, and Aboriginals. We don't really learn the names like they're. It's more like they're a character as a group, but they're not really individual characters. At least they're not strong individual characters. It's at this time that we learn what Cora's deal is. And she comes from Texas, and her home was attacked by Comanches. And she tried to hide in the root cellar. And she had her baby with her. And the baby was crying. And she didn't want the Comanches to find her and the baby. So she accidentally smothers her baby to keep her baby from crying. And this kind of happened, or this reminded me what happened in the season finale of MASH. And I was like, if anybody remembers the last episode of MASH, it's a series finale, not the season finale. But if anybody remembers the very last episode of MASH, it's like a very pivotal scene. And this is a scene where Hawkeye, one of the main characters, they're hiding from like he and a bunch of locals are, I think they're on a bus or something like that. And they're hiding from, I guess their camp had gotten overrun or something like that. And they're hiding from the enemy. And there's a woman in the bus. And when you see her, she appears to have a chicken. And Hawkeye doesn't want to be discovered because the chicken is clucking. And Hawkeye is telling the woman to keep the chicken quiet. And so the woman is doing her best to keep the chicken quiet. And this is Hawkeye recounting what had happened. So you're seeing all of these. It's a scene, but you're seeing this scene from a telling that Hawkeye is giving. So the audience is seeing what Hawkeye saw. And then, and I think Hawkeye is talking to like a therapist or some kind of mental health specialist, or maybe he's talking to a friend or something like that. And then it's revealed that the woman did not have a chicken. The woman actually had a baby. And for whatever reason, Hawkeye thought he saw a chicken, but really the woman had a baby. And it's revealed that the woman had smothered her baby to keep the enemy from discovering them and getting them all killed. And this is when Hawkeye is revealing that it was I guess at that moment he realized that it was a baby and not a chicken. And so a similar thing happened in this movie where a woman has a baby. There are dangerous men that are looking they're looking around, and if they find her, they'll kill her and the baby, and she's trying to keep the baby quiet, and she accidentally smothers her baby. And then when her husband comes home and saw what she did, he basically puts her on a boat to Australia and abandons her. And her husband's name is Roy. So this causes an enormous amount of PTSD in her, and she's suffering from a whole host of mental health issues. And part of that is from accidentally killing her child and then the subsequent abandonment by her husband. This makes Cora, I think, one of the most unique love interests that can be introduced in a movie or in any particular story. So I thought that was a very interesting perspective on how a relationship could happen in a movie. Like, they could have done the usual thing in a movie. She could have just been a regular woman, and they could have had what's usually done in a movie of the sexual tension between the male lead and the female lead, and then at the end of the movie they'll eventually get together. But in this case, Cora is crazy, and she's clinging to the main character, Quigley, in a way that leading ladies don't normally do in these types of movies. And he's the one that's basically, he's not repulsed by her, but he's kind of keeping his distance from her as much as he can because she keeps calling him Roy, and he keeps telling her that his name is Mathew, and he recognizes that like she needs mental health assistance, and he's not qualified to give her that assistance. And there is a moment where she is trying to give herself to him, and he doesn't accept that because she keeps calling him Roy, and I think he feels like he'd be taking advantage of her if he accepts her invitation, so to speak. So he kind of, like I said, keeps her at a distance. He tries not to take advantage of her because he understands, or I think he has a coarser, he has enough of an understanding of her mental problems that he feels that he shouldn't take advantage of her in the way that she wants him to. Marston's men eventually track them down, and they start killing off they find them with the Aboriginals. I don't know if they find them with the Aboriginals. Marston's men eventually track them down, or they track down the Aboriginals who had been helping them, and so they start killing off the Aboriginals, and Quigley finds himself defending the Aboriginals, and they do it in some of the cruelest ways. Like, one of the ways that they try to they basically force like a whole group of Aboriginals off of a cliff by running their horses into them and forcing them and shooting at them and forcing them to jump off the cliff to get away from the men that are shooting at them. And these are like the men, the women, and the children. And so they're just overly cruel and basically evil. And this is probably the type of thing that Quigley has seen in America. And while they're doing all this, he's, using his incredible shooting skills to kill them from a distance, basically to snipe them from an impressive distance. And then when he runs them off, they have found a baby has survived, probably about 1 or 2 years old. They found a baby that has basically survived the fall. And they recognize these people as the people that had rescued them from the outback. So Cora takes the baby, and basically to take care of the baby. The thing is, they have to take care of the baby, but at the same time, Quigley is kind of worried of Cora because Cora might develop the same type of attachment to the baby as Cora had attached to Quigley himself, calling him Roy all the time. Also in this skirmish, they actually acquire at least one horse, and they still have to hide in the outback. But now they have a baby, and they got no food. They're running out of food and running out of water. So Quigley decides to go to a nearby town. He leaves Cora hidden in the outback with the baby, and he goes riding into town to get more supplies to survive out in the desert. When he gets to the town, he also is lucky to find a gunsmith. This is like the friendliest man that he runs into in Australia. It's a man named Grimmelman, and Grimmelman is a gunsmith and he owns a store. So as a gunsmith, Grimmelman is able to make this special ammo that Quigley's rifle uses. But while he's in town, Cora is alone with the baby in the outback. Quigley had left her, along with the food and water, he left her a pistol, a revolver. He doesn't use revolvers much. He says that he doesn't have much use for revolvers. And she hears the dingoes outside. The dingoes are on the hunt. They're looking for flesh to eat. And I remember before there was a controversy about whether dingoes would attack people and eat children, and apparently they do. And I I'm remembering this from a court case where a woman was accused of either child abuse or murdering her child or something like that. It was a case in Australia, and she tried to tell the court that the dingoes had ate her child or attacked them and ate her or something like that. And the courts didn't believe her. It was like, oh, it's not something that dingoes would do. But then later on, they found evidence that dingoes did eat her child. In any case, in this movie, the dingoes, like I said, they're on the hunt, and the child starts crying. And at first, she has this instinct to try to keep the child quiet. But then it's like she has a flashback and she remembers what happened to her own baby. So she she tells the child to cry as much as he wants to. And then as the dingoes start to approach, she starts to kill the dingoes with her gun. And this is all while Quigley is still in town. While Quigley is in town, Marston's men catch up with him. Well, they spot him in town, and so now there's a huge action sequence where they're trying to kill Quigley, and in the process they start burning up the town. I think the man's store had got burned up, and I think they shot his wife. I can't remember all the things that had happened, but it was Quigley is able to get away with his provisions. There's enough provisions where he can basically take revenge on Marston. The next day they start to head back to Marston's. They run into, I guess they get to another town or something like that, and they see Aboriginals in town to trade supplies and whatnot. And it's at that point that they give the baby to the Aboriginals that are in town. And so Quigley and Cora, they head off to the well, actually I think he leaves her in the town and he rides off to take his revenge on Marston. So at the end of the movie, there's a big shootout. There's Quigley customarily shooting people from a distance, but he ultimately gets captured because there are so many men. He kills a lot of them, but eventually they get close enough where they're able to capture him. And Marston himself he favors the pistol, the revolver, and he's demonstrated that he's a quick shot with the revolver, and he wants to introduce. And Quigley had said, like before, he's always said that he doesn't have much use for revolvers. He's a rifleman, and so Marston, like after Quigley is like shot in the leg and he's like pretty roughed up by the men. And so Marston, he's going to teach Quigley how to quick draw. It's basically setting himself up to murder Quigley and in a quick draw, in a quick draw competition. So the thing is that since he's like specializes in a quick draw with a revolver, his men is going to stand Quigley up. He gives Quigley a revolver to make it fair. And then they're going to have a good old-fashioned gunfight. And this is another great scene in the movie. Because the two men, they're like standing on either side of Quigley. They're both armed. And they're both basically ready to shoot Quigley if Quigley shows any attempt to run away or whatever. Marston sets up the gunfight and, sets up the rules. And then when it's time for them to draw, Quigley is so fast with his revolver that he kills the two men that are beside him and kills Marston before Marston even has a chance to draw his weapon. And then he walks up to Marston, and Marston isn't dead yet. So this is when he tells Marston, he said, "I said I never had much use for one. I never said I didn't know how to use it." And then kills Marston after that announcement. And then after all of this action takes place, there's a British army that shows up. They showed up earlier in the film, and then they show up again, and they're asking all kinds of questions and whatnot. And then when they show up, all of a sudden the Aboriginals show up, and it's like this time it's like it looks like there are several groups of Aboriginals that have banded together, and they're basically surrounding the whole house. And they only have their primitive weapons. Like, they don't have any rifles or revolvers or anything like that, but there are a lot of them. I think it's an army major and his group. They see all of these men that are surrounding them, and they decide to let Quigley go without issue. And then later on, you see Quigley and Cora, and they're back at the port. They're about to go back to America, and there's a tense moment. There's an agent, and he's asking for their names, and there's a wanted poster for Mathew Quigley. So Quigley wisely says that his name is Roy. I forgot what the last name he used, but he says his name is Roy, basically the name that Crazy Cora keeps calling him. And because nobody really knows what Quigley looks like, they, basically let him pass. And at the end of the movie, she also calls him Mathew Quigley because I guess she wants him so bad that she's willing to move past her mental illness to identify him the way he wants to be identified. I really like this movie. I like that, how it was cast. I like the dialogue, the overall story, some of the unusual story elements. Like Crazy Cora by herself is a very unusual story element. I like that it was trying to say something about Aboriginals and First Nations people. We have compassion for them through Quigley, through Quigley's experience and his compassion. And it seems like in times like these, we can all use a little bit more compassion. And that's it for our favorite parts. Let's see, or let us check out the Trivia Top 10. It's the Trivia Top 10, and this is a top 10 trivia that I found on IMDb. Alan Rickman decided to take the part because filming was taking place in Australia, a country he had always wanted to visit. And that's pretty awesome. It's so awesome that you have a job where they were like, well, we're going to a place that you've always wanted to visit. It's like, and Alan Rickman was like, bet. And the whole film was filmed in Australia. It was filmed on location, so I thought that's pretty awesome. Tom Selleck said his scariest moment ever as an actor occurred while standing on a boulder near Alice Springs, Australia, over a cliff. Quote, I had to look down, and it was a big boulder. So they just said, just go stand on the boulder. You'll be fine. End quote. But the boulder started rattling back and forth. And then Tom Selleck said, maybe you need to tie me off. Yeah, I don't know if they actually tied him off. But I can understand that being a scary moment. The film was to have been Steve McQueen's next film after The Hunter from 1980, but he fell ill shortly after making that, so the project was scrapped. It was revived several times through the 1980s, with various stars in mind for the lead. Harrison Ford was offered the lead role but turned it down because he considered it too visibly similar to Indiana Jones. And it is too visually similar to Indiana Jones. I don't think that Harrison Ford can really do a Western without him looking like Indiana Jones. It would be really hard. The lead was first offered to Tom Selleck in 1985. He turned it down because of his commitment to Magnum P.I. in 1980. When the series concluded in 1988, he quickly asked if the role was still available and accepted it. The producer spent another year gathering a reasonable budget. And what's interesting is that here you see the flip side, where he was originally asked to play Indiana Jones, but couldn't do it because of Magnum P.I. And then Harrison Ford got that role. And then later, when this film came around, they asked Harrison Ford to play this role, but he turned it down. So they ended up getting Tom Selleck. But the funny thing is that Tom Selleck still had to turn it down initially because of Magnum P.I. and was only able to do it after Magnum P.I. concluded, or, after the series finished. 3 Sharps rifles were custom built for the film, with an octagonal barrel and a lengthened stock to accommodate Tom Selleck's tall frame. 1 rifle was used for shooting, 1 used as a club in fight scenes, and a backup weapon in case one was damaged. Selleck requested to keep the 3 rifles built for the film. He had 2 of them reconditioned to remove scratches and strengthen and tighten some of the moving parts. Years later, he signed and auctioned 2 of them as part of a fundraiser for the National Rifle Association, of which he is a national board member. Selleck donated the 3rd rifle, with its fringed leather scabbard and belt knife, to the Brownells Family Museum. And I saw an interesting YouTube video about a guy who had the privilege of presenting the sharp rifle that was donated to the Brownells Museum. And I'll see if I can find that video and put that in the show notes. Sharps rifles are now so inseparably related to this film that they are commonly nicknamed Quigley guns. Sales for such weapons increased over 1,000% following the film's release, especially in the United States and Australia, and continued through 2013. So that's pretty neat. Mathew Quigley's is a replica model of the 1874 Sharps Buffalo rifle built by the Shiloh Rifles of Montana. They are chambered in .45-110, which is 45 caliber bullet propelled by 110 grains of black powder. This round was the most accurate and powerful in the world until the advent of smokeless gunpowders. So that makes Quigley's skill all the more believable. As a matter of fact, in the scene where Quigley demonstrates the rifle, he mentions that the bullet is paper patch, which might sound like some Hollywood mumbo jumbo. However, it's an actual technique common in the mid to late 19th century to maximize accuracy and precision. The dead soft leads used in 19th century bullets easily transferred to the rifle barrel and rifling, affecting accuracy of subsequent shots. A thin layer of paper is placed around the bullet, which eliminates leading and preserves accuracy. Quigley's ability to shoot accurately over 1,200 yards, or 1.9 kilometers, with iron sights is not as far-fetched as it sounds. In 1874, during the Second Battle of Adobe Walls in northern Texas, William Dixon used a 50-110 Sharps to shoot a Native American off his horse from 1,538 yards, or 1.4 kilometers. Such a heavy bullet propelled by black powder would have a trajectory similar to that of an arrow fired from 100 yards, striking its target at a 30-degree down angle. Dixon claims his shot was pure luck. And that's probably true. While discussing the Colt Army revolver during the dinner in Marston's house, Quigley quips that God made all men, and they say Sam Colt made them equal, more or less. This is a paraphrase of the post-Civil War slogan, Abe Lincoln may have freed all men, but Sam Colt made them equal. I thought that line sounded familiar. MGM had high hopes for this movie and thought they had a hit on their hands. They were therefore taken aback when it flopped. On its theatrical release in the US, this may have ultimately led to their decision to allow foreign distributors to release it at their own convenience over the next 12 months. So, that's the thing that happened. So that's it for the trivia. Let's see what the critics thought. The critics have it at 52% audience and popcorn meter at 74% on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb Reviews has it at 6.9 out of 10. So let's see Gene Siskel, that old standard, from the Chicago Tribune. He wrote, "Only Alan Rickman, the villain in Die Hard, as an evil land baron, offers any entertainment." And so I strongly disagree with that. I thought there were so many points of entertainment in this movie, and I'm not exactly sure what he's watching. Especially like Crazy Cora. I mean, the character's name is Crazy Cora, and she acts that way. I thought that was very entertaining. I thought it was very entertaining how Tom Selleck shot the rifle. It's like there were lots of points of entertainment in this movie, so I'm not exactly sure what he's getting at. Marianne Brossett from Spirituality and Practice wrote, "Hits the mark with its mix of Western theatrics and cross-cultural insights." Yeah, that's something I noticed too. Marianne gets it. We go over to Siskel's partner, Roger Ebert, from the Chicago Sun-Times, who wrote, "Quigley Down Under is a handsome film, well acted, and it's a shame the filmmakers didn't spend a little more energy on making it smarter and more original." I don't know. I thought it was pretty smart, and I thought there were a lot of original elements. So I don't know. I don't know about this one. Finally, Mike Massey from Gone with the Twins wrote, "Right from the start, Basil Polidorus' thundering, upbeat, playful music truly sets the tone for this rip-roaring, dusty adventure." And I agree. Finally, Quigley Down Under is, as of this recording, is available on Amazon Prime. The next film we check out will be the one that I have wanted to do for a long time. I've specifically wanted to examine this story of patriotism specifically as close to July 4th as I could. That's because the nickname for this movie in the promotional materials was ID4, and the film's actual release under the name Independence Day. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter at Backlook Cinema. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at friends@backlookcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like the show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, be empathetic, share a movie with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.